March 2nd meeting of the Issaquah Development Commission to order. It is 7:10. Welcome. Due to the virtual format of tonight's meeting and the large number of community members that would like to comment, I'd like to start by providing some guidelines to help the meeting run more efficiently. And we have participants attending both by computer and others who may be attending by phone. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when you're not speaking to eliminate the background noise. And if you're having technical issues, you can try joining the meeting using a different device, such as a smartphone or a tablet, or you can use the call-in information in the meeting invite to call in the meeting this evening. An overview for tonight's meeting, we do have one agenda item. It is a public hearing for the Providence Heights School project, and this is a quasi-judicial matter. So we want to take attendance. So Lucy, if you would please call the roll, and commissioners, please unmute and say here when your name's called. Lucy. Lucy, you're muted.
Never adjust to this well. Thank you. Chair Brennan.
Here.
Commissioner Sanford.
Here.
Commissioner Soa.
Here.
Commissioner Dillon.
Here.
Commissioner Shore.
Here.
Commissioner Price is absent. Commissioner Ikeda.
Here.
And Commissioner Morgan.
Here. Thank you, Lucy. I'd like to note that both alternative commissioners, Commissioner Morgan and Ikeda, are serving as regular commissioners, commission members this evening due to the resignation of one regular commissioner and the recusal of another regular commissioner. We'll discuss the recusal during the appearance of fairness disclosures. So the first piece of business that we need to address is the meeting minutes from our February 2nd Development Commission meeting. We'll need to approve those this evening. So hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to review those. Are there any corrections to the February 2nd, 2022 meeting minutes that were provided in the agenda packet? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by consensus. Thank you. So there is also an opportunity at our commission meetings for the general public to comment on topics that are not on the agenda. The commission rules provide for that opportunity. So we would like to open the floor for any members of the public that would like to comment on topics that are not before the commission at tonight's public hearing. So again, if you do want to comment during the public hearing, that opportunity will come a little bit later in the meeting. But if you want to make a comment on something that's not on tonight's agenda, this is your opportunity. So if you're on a phone and not a computer, please press 3 on your phone. Or if you are on a computer, raise your virtual hand. Lucy, is there anyone that would like to speak?
I do not see anyone.
Great. So moving on to the main agenda for this evening, it is the public hearing on the Providence Heights project. The purpose of tonight's public hearing is for the commission to review and make recommendations and findings of fact to be forwarded to the City Council on the Master Site Plan, MSP 20-0001, Site Development Permit, SDP 20-00001, and 5 administrative adjustments of standards. Those include AAS 20-0013, AAS 21-00001, AAS 21-0002, AAS 21-0005, and AAS 21-0006 for the Providence Heights project. The proposal is for the construction of a new consolidated high school and elementary school campus that will serve approximately 2,000 students and include sports stadiums with lighting, tennis courts with lighting, unlit sports fields, outdoor learning spaces, structured and surface parking, utility upgrades, new pedestrian and vehicle facilities, and related improvements. The site is approximately 40 acres and is near the intersection of 228th Avenue Southeast and the Providence Heights Loop. So just for the public, the order that the hearing proceeds in, these are the major elements of a public hearing. We'll go through an appearance of fairness disclosures for the commission. We will open the public hearing. There is a staff presentation on the project. An applicant is also given an opportunity to make a presentation. We would then accept public comment, so we'll open for public comment, then followed by an opportunity for rebuttal by the applicant and the staff. And then we would close the public hearing. Following the closure of the public hearing, the commission then would deliberate on the information that we have received to date and in the public hearing. The commission would then take action, and then we would conclude the agenda item on the quasi-judicial permit. Again, it would be on a recommendation that would be forwarded to the city council. We do not expect we will conclude the public comments this evening. We have a number of people who have pre-registered to speak, and we'll continue to take public comment tomorrow evening on March 3rd, with the remainder of the public hearing agenda to be continued, scheduled for March 16th. So I want to move on to the next piece here, which is the appearance of fairness disclosures. Lucy, please proceed with questioning the commissioners about appearance of fairness disclosures.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So for a quasi-judicial matter, it requires that our proceedings be to be fair in both fact and appearance, similar to a courtroom setting. Ex parte contacts are prohibited. Those are communications outside of the hearing between a decision maker and an opponent or proponent of the matter at hand. If such communications have occurred, record of the substance of the communication must be placed on the record to allow other interested parties the right to rebut the substance of the communication. The test would be if a disinterested person, having been apprised of the totality of a decision maker's personal interest in a matter being acted upon, would be reasonably justified in thinking that partiality may exist. Decision makers who have a personal interest, prejudgment of issues, or partiality are disqualified from the proceedings. Commissioners, please read the questions on this slide, and then I will take a roll call of your answers. Maybe raise your hand once you've finished reading, just so I have a sense. Okay. Commissioner Brennan,
No.
Commissioner Sanford,
No issues.
Commissioner Soa,
No.
Commissioner Dillon,
My employer, my company does have a business relationship with the applicant's engineer. We have no involvement in this project, nor have I had any connection or previous knowledge of it. So I don't believe it would affect my ability to fairly assess the application.
and it would be no to all the other questions.
Correct.
Commissioner Shore,
No to all questions.
Commissioner Price is absent. Commissioner Ikeda
No to all questions.
and Commissioner Morgan.
I no to all except for the third. My in-laws live within Providence Point, but we've not discussed the project and do not believe it would influence my decision.
Thank you, commissioners. I just want to mention at this time that we received a letter from Commissioner Kevin Price recusing himself from the proceedings due to an appearance of fairness conflict. And Commissioner Price is also unavailable tonight and tomorrow night. I will now proceed to the next slide. Please read this, and then I will ask each of you to respond. Chair Brennan,
Yes.
Chair Sanford, Commissioner Sanford,
Yes.
Commissioner Soa,
Yes.
Commissioner Dillon,
Yes.
Commissioner Shore,
Yes.
Commissioner Price, absent, Commissioner Ikeda,
Yes.
and Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
As the final component of the appearance of fairness disclosures, I would like to ask if any audience members wish to challenge the participation of any commissioner based on appearance of fairness doctrine. If you have an objection, raise your virtual hand or type objection into the chat window. And when called upon, please be prepared to state the name of the member and the reason or reasons why you believe they should be disqualified from this matter.
And Lucy, I would like to add for anyone on the phone, you can raise your virtual hand by pressing *3.
Thank you. And Tisha, you'll need to be watching because I don't have access to that screen at this time.
I'm monitoring the attendees and the chat. At this time, I don't see any hands raised nor any messages.
Great, thank you. So there is no objection to the participation of any of the commissioners present tonight. However, I ask the commission to vote on excusing Commissioner Price from these proceedings while the commission is considering the Providence Heights permits. So the question before the commission is, should Commissioner Price be excused from voting on the Providence Heights proceeding? What we would need to do is essentially take a roll call vote. Again, on the question of should Commissioner Price be excused from voting on the Providence Heights proceedings, tonight's proceedings and those to come following tonight on this project. So a roll call, Lucy, and if you are agreeable to excusing Commissioner Price, please say yes. If you are not, please say no.
Chair Brennan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanford,
Yes.
Commissioner Soa,
Yes.
Commissioner Dillon,
Yes.
Commissioner Shore,
Yes.
Commissioner Ikeda,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Thank you. So Commissioner Price is excused from these proceedings. So now I want to open the public hearing. So the public hearing for Providence Heights Project MSP 20-0001, SDP 20-00001, AAS 20-00012, AAS 21-00001, AAS 21-00002, AAS 21-00005, AAS 21-00006 is now open. That's a lot of numbers. We move now to the staff presentation, and that presentation will be provided by consulting planner Christina Hayworth. Commissioners, please hold your questions until Ms. Hayworth has completed her presentation, and then we can ask any questions regarding that presentation following Ms. Hayworth. So Ms. Hayworth.
Thank you, Commissioner Brennan. Bear with me while I get the slideshow launched and shared. Okay, can everyone see this okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. So good evening, and thank you to all who are joining us tonight. My name is Christina Hayworth. I'm a consulting planner working with the City of Issaquah to review this project. As Commissioner Brennan stated, this is the staff presentation for Issaquah School District's Providence Heights proposal, which is the construction of a new consolidated high school and elementary school campus. Here's maybe. Okay, here we go. Here's the agenda for the rest of tonight's meeting. So I'll go over the project, talk about some key topics of interest that we've heard about, and then review the permit process and next steps. Then we'll have an opportunity for Q&A, the applicant presentation, more Q&A, and then public testimony. So with that, let's get started. I do have a correction to make to this staff report that I noticed as I was preparing this presentation. The section summary, which is a gray box on page 74, should read that the proposal complies with the minimum tree retention requirement. This is a sentence in the second paragraph of that box. And this is supported by the analysis that follows the section summary. It was just an oversight when finishing the last edits on the staff report. We also have several new attachments to add into the record, as I'm sure you all have seen. Attachment 102 will be all of the public comments received between February 16th of this year and today at 5 p.m. These have been forwarded to the Development Commission upon receipt in advance of this meeting, but they'll be officially packaged as an attachment. We do expect to receive additional comments. In fact, I have received additional comments since 5 p.m. and those will be bundled up and entered into the record tomorrow. Attachment number 103 is a SEPA addendum. This was prepared by the Issaquah School District, dated February 25th, 2022, and it analyzes project phasing. And then attachments 104 and 105 are the slide decks that you are viewing tonight. So 104 is the staff presentation and 105 is the applicant presentation. All right, let's get started with some context. The project site is shown here in red. It's located in the northern part of the city of Issaquah along the eastern edge of the municipal boundary shared with the city of Sammamish. Access is from 228th Avenue Southeast, presently at two driveways that are identified here with the red outlined yellow dots on the east property line. These lead to an internal access roadway called Providence Heights Loop, which is the white dashed line around the center of the property. The property line is shared with Bellwood to the north. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. But Bellwood is up here on the very northern property line. And then the property line is shared with Providence Point to the northwest, southwest, southeast, and south. 228th Avenue Southeast right-of-way forms the eastern property boundary. The site was formerly developed as the Providence Heights College. Most improvements have since been demolished, but what remains is this central clearing still shown here on this aerial, some pavement kind of scattered around the property, and a water tower that's down in the southern edge of the property. Topography is rolling and fairly variable across the site, with slopes ranging from flat to greater than 50% in some areas. And there are also two isolated low habitat quality wetlands on the south of the property. So wetlands B over here, close to the Providence Heights Loop roadway, and then wetland C, which is sort of near the water tower. Okay. Issaquah School District, which I'll refer to as ISD or the applicant going forward, is proposing to redevelop this site with a new consolidated high school and elementary school campus. The high school has a maximum capacity of 1,823 students and 150 faculty and staff members. The high school is also supported by accessory facilities, including athletic facilities and some other operational features shown on the plans. Future phases of work are shown on the plans for the high school and include a 10,000 square foot addition that's on the west side of the building, and 4 portables, which are already accounted for in these capacity numbers. The elementary school has a maximum capacity of 744 students and 75 faculty and staff. It's going to be supported by accessory playground facilities, and future phases shown on the plans include an additional 4 portable buildings. The proposal also includes infrastructure like site circulation for vehicles and pedestrians, utilities, and operational features like the bus driveway, turnaround loop, and parking areas. And I'll go through all of the major site elements with you now. If you'd like to follow along, this graphic is also shown in the staff report on page 20. So number 1 here towards the south side of the property is the high school building. 1A is the location of that 10,000 square foot addition that I mentioned, and 1B is the location of the portables that are 1A and 1B are those future phases. Number 2 on the west side of the property is the proposed elementary school. The playground is to the south of the school building, and 2A identifies where those future portables will go. Number 3 on the graphic is the stadium and track. Grandstands are on the west side. They're kind of in the center of the linear portion of track on the west side. They're facing eastward, and the scoreboard, which is a little difficult to see, is on the north side of the field facing southward. Item 4 on this graphic is the ball field complex. That includes a softball field, a baseball field, batting cages, and a central plaza. Number 5 is the parking garage. This also has 4 rooftop tennis courts on the northern edge of the garage. Number 6 is the high school bus pickup, drop off, and parking loop. The elementary school bus pickup and drop off is actually just along the east side of the elementary school building and playground. Buses would continue through the high school loop to the parking area and still continue to park at number 6. Number 7, which is shown around the property in green, is the proposed vegetated buffer. So this is the area of the site that will remain either undisturbed or disturbed and replanted. There will be some pavement removal from this buffer area. The Providence Heights Loop roadway will be pulled out of the buffer and it will be replanted with additional vegetation. Number 8 on this graphic is the primary access to the site. This is a signalized entry, and this is ingress and egress for anyone visiting the site for school, for drop off, for pickup, for whatever reason. And then finally, number 9 is an emergency access. So this is gated in 2 places and will only be used for emergency response. So all traffic will go, all general traffic will go through the signalized entry. That is number 8 on these plans. Okay. You also already mentioned that there are 5 requested administrative adjustments of standards. These are seeking relief from certain code requirements. These are all contemplated in the code, and we'll go through them one by one. The first request that ISD has made is to reduce the minimum required floor area ratio. The minimum requirement in the code is 0.75, and ISD is requesting to reduce that to 0.42. This is allowed in the IMC when reduction is less than 50% of that 0.75 minimum, which in this case it is. The practical outcome of this request is that it results in less building mass on the property by forcing them to build less three-dimensional structure. So for those who are not as familiar with the FAR, that's the floor area ratio. That's the ratio between the building square footage and the developable site area, regardless of how the building is configured. So you can see what a floor area ratio of 1 looks like in a few different configurations in this graphic. So you can see how building mass kind of changes and compresses, but is still that same FAR of 1. So when they're looking at a reduction, it would be minimizing the building envelope, which is how it results in less building mass on the property. The second request ISD is making is to reduce the minimum required tree retention from 25% to 23%. This is allowed by code, which refers to the Central Issaquah Design and Development Standards Landscaping Chapter. It's a little complicated. Let me know if there are any questions on that. But there are certain criteria that have to be met for any kind of modification to tree retention to be approved. Staff, upon review of all of the application materials, found that an AAS is actually not required, and that's something that I will dig into a little bit later in the presentation. The third requested AAS is an authorization for shared parking facilities. ISD is asking to share parking on site between its daytime school uses and its after-school event uses. The idea here is that these uses are generally mutually exclusive, so parking spaces can be effectively shared because no daytime users will be parked for after-school uses unless they leave and come back. This reduces the total number of on-site parking stalls in surface and structured parking. And requirements for daytime uses, which have the higher number of parking spaces required, are met in the current plans as shown. This type of sharing is allowed by code when it's supported with a parking study, which the applicant has submitted, and it is part of the record for this project. A condition of approval does require that ISD provide a special event management plan for overflow parking to ensure that there is no spillover parking in adjacent neighborhoods. And that would be reviewed and approved by city staff before the high school is allowed to begin operating. The fourth AAS request is to for relief from continuous non-motorized walkways in certain areas shown in red on this site plan. This is also on page 57 of the staff report if you're following along with me. There's adequate non-motorized accessibility along the major walking routes, and allowing relief in the areas shown in red will help save trees by reducing site grading. There's also some advantage to not having students walking in areas of the building that are a little less visually accessible, like they're on the eastern edge of the high school itself. And so there will be a gate that will prevent unauthorized access there as well, just to make sure that folks aren't walking back and forth there. The last administrative adjustment of standards request is for reducing the total number of non-motorized street frontage connections from 8 to the 3 that are shown here. So this is not expected to impact site accessibility because non-motorized traffic will arrive only from the north or south along the frontage improvements that are being constructed as part of this project. And further, it supports tree retention by limiting grading and additional pavement along the 228th Avenue Southeast street frontage. AASs are typically decided using a level 2 process, which is a staff or administrative decision. But upon review of the elevation criteria in the Municipal Code 1804.100B, staff determined that these all meet the requirements to bump up the AAS requests to the level 5 process and consolidate the AASs with the MSP and SDP, which means that DC will also make a recommendation on these requests as well as the underlying land use permit. Okay. Next section, the top project topics of interest. So there's been a lot of public interest in this project since and even prior to its submittal. And so I'm going to address some of the most frequently discussed topics of interest. The first one is SEPA. This has been a very hot topic and is a little bit confusing sometimes. So under the state's SEPA rules, ISD, as the government agency project proponent, is the lead agency for the proposal. That is in the SEPA rules, WAC 197-11-926. The lead agency's responsibilities include preparing the SEPA checklist and reviewing the SEPA checklist, preferably by different groups from, so that they're a little bit mutually exclusive. And also issuing a threshold determination based on the review of that SEPA checklist. Only the lead agency can make the threshold determination. This isn't anything that the DC can decide. That threshold determination could take the form of a determination of non-significance, a mitigated determination of non-significance, or a determination of significance within EIS process. The City of Issaquah is an agency with jurisdiction. Agencies with jurisdictions have responsibilities to review the SEPA checklist and threshold determination when it's circulated, submit comments as appropriate, make themselves available for consultation during the review process, and act as a partner in implementing mitigation conditions. ISD issued its final MDNS on January 17th of this year, which means that SEPA is considered final for the purpose of processing these land use permits. The City of Issaquah did not appeal the final SEPA determination. ISD also issued an addendum on February 25th of this year. The addendum analyzed phasing of the elementary school building and facilities. The addendum does not change any of the underlying threshold determination or mitigation measures identified in the MDNS. The next topic that we'll discuss is project phasing, which is a relatively recent change for this project. The master site plan process is specifically intended to authorize phasing of development projects. So this phasing approach is appropriate. Phase 1 will consist of the high school athletic facilities, site infrastructure, and a portion of the elementary school infrastructure. The Phase 2 elementary school boundary is shown on this slide and also in the staff report on page 64. Improvements within this geographic area, this Phase 2 geographic area that will be constructed in Phase 1 include exterior retaining walls, utility stub outs, earthwork to leave the Phase 2 area at the elementary school subgrade level, some temporary stormwater ponds, and a temporary material stockpile that is going to be used to fill in the temporary stormwater ponds and balance future earthwork for Phase 2 improvements. The remainder of the elementary school improvements, including the building itself, the playground, et cetera, those will all be constructed as part of Phase 2. I did also mention some other future phases that were previously identified. That includes the 4 portables for each school building and the high school addition. Okay. We'll move on to tree removal now. So the applicant requested a reduction from 25% retention to 23% retention. This was requested because the base tree count incorrectly included dead and dying trees, but the base tree count and retention are based on significant trees, which which exclude dead, dying, and hazardous trees. So when correctly counted, the project actually complies with tree retention requirements at 26%, and an AAS is not required. However, if dead and dying trees are included in the baseline calculations for determining the retention percentage, the applicant meets the applicable approval criteria for a modification as discussed on pages 90 to 96 in the staff report. This retention approach is consistent with the intent of the landscaping chapter of the Central Issaquah Design and Development Standards. It includes groupings of smaller trees, and this was confirmed by a supplemental tree survey that was submitted in mid-February and is part of your hearing packet for this evening. Once you include those smaller trees as contemplated in the modification criteria, the site actually results in a 28% retention for trees. There are some unique topography and design constraints with this project, and trees will be mitigated on site by planting over 900 new trees. So the proposal complies with these modification criteria without the need for an AAS. The next hot topic we'll touch on is stormwater management. This is a little bit complicated because there are multiple jurisdictions and differing regulations. On-site improvements are regulated by the City of Issaquah with the 2014 Department of Ecology Stormwater Management Manual and a 2017 addendum to that manual. Off-site improvements, the frontage improvements that are going in the 228th right-of-way, are regulated by the City of Sammamish, which uses the 2016 King County Surface Water Design Manual and their own adopted addendum to that manual. So there are a lot of different regulations that overlap here. However, upon review and discussion between City of Issaquah and City of Sammamish staff, we found that stormwater requirements are equivalent under both sets of regulations. So that includes requirements for flow control, for enhanced water quality treatment, and for sensitive lake protection because the ultimate drainage location for water leaving the site is Lake Sammamish. There are two drainage basins on the site. There's a northeast basin and a southwest basin and a ridge that separates the two of them running through the approximate middle of the property. Both of these basins eventually discharge to Laughing Jacobs Creek and Lake Sammamish. The applicant has proposed a stormwater management system of underground vaults that will collect runoff from the site. And their initial design overestimated the total capacity that was necessary to account for any changes that may occur during the land use permitting process. So they've got more than enough capacity for the improvements that they're showing. They are complying with the runoff water quality treatment requirements. They are providing enhanced treatment, which includes not only removal of dissolved metals, but also phosphorus to address that sensitive lake overlay. They're also complying with flow control requirements. These requirements have them detaining stormwater and releasing it at rates equal to or less than 50% of the 2 to 50-year peak flow. Typical flows are discharged consistent with the historic flows to downstream points. And what that means is the flows that were established when the Providence Heights College was constructed. So in this case, that means that it discharges to the Providence Point stormwater system. ISD is required to protect that Providence Point stormwater system, both during construction and during operation of the school facilities. Any peak overflows, flows that exceed this 2 to 50-year peak flow, will be collected and conveyed to Southeast 43rd Way. The applicant is going to provide a little bit more detailed information about this part of the stormwater design when we get to their presentation. The next topic that we'll discuss is the impacted wetland sea. So if you want to follow along with me, we're looking at images from the staff report on page 104 and 106, which I've just reformatted into this inset map. So wetland C is an isolated category 4 wetland with a very low habitat value, just over 1,800 square feet. And per the city's critical areas regulations, it does not require any kind of buffer. The applicant is proposing to fill the wetland and mitigate the impact off-site. The impact would be permanent and irreversible. And so they're proposing offsite mitigation for that. This proposal meets the criteria in the IMC for impacting the wetland permanently, including mitigation sequencing to ensure that it's adequately mitigated. Their mitigation proposal is to purchase one-to-one credits at the East Lake Sammamish Mitigation Bank. This mitigation proposal was already approved by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and actually the school district has already purchased the credits. So it's, if it's approved, it's already been mitigated for. All right. The next topic we'll discuss is traffic, congestion, and access. So the project will generate about 1,300 morning peak trips and 862 PM peak trips. The applicant submitted a traffic impact analysis looking at 23 different study intersections in the city of Issaquah and the city of Sammamish. Most projected, or most intersections are projected to perform at or above the adopted level of service standards in each respective city, but some intersection delays do require mitigation. In the city of Issaquah, traffic mitigation will consist of the payment of traffic impact fees, various traffic mitigation plans, for example, for construction traffic, and some non-motorized improvements on Southeast 43rd Way. These are actually voluntary improvements that the applicant has chosen to add to their project to tie into the recently completed intersection improvements at 43rd Way. In the city of Sammamish, traffic mitigation will include widening and frontage improvements along 228th Avenue Southeast. The frontage improvements include bike lanes and sidewalks that are not currently present on that roadway. They are also coordinating with the city of Sammamish to make some capacity improvements to the intersection to the north, which is 228th and Southeast 40th. They are also working with the city to discuss a school zone speed limit along the portion of 228th in front of the school property. All right. The next topic that we'll talk about is proposed uses on site. So the high school, the elementary school, and accessory facilities are all allowed uses when they meet code requirements. ISD is responsible for programming its school facilities per state law. The city can't pick and choose which accessory facilities to include except as allowed by code. But the city can require code compliance and mitigation for impacts associated with those facilities. We've also heard a lot about compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. So I've just included a short list of some of the main measures that the project has included that ensures compatibility, since this is specifically a review criterion that needs to be addressed. So the first one is the vegetated buffer. This is voluntary in that it far exceeds the minimum setback requirements. It relies primarily on existing vegetation, which is mature, tall trees. The vegetation will be enhanced with new plantings, especially where some pavement is being removed from that buffer area. And those will be emphasizing native and naturalized species that will thrive in this environment. This vegetated buffer will also be perpetually protected with a native growth protection easement with both the SEPA conditions of approval and the recommended conditions of approval with the staff report. The site was designed to face inwardly, so noise generating facilities are towards the center of the property as much as possible. One example of that is that there's no lighting or public address system at the ball fields. All of that kind of activity is going to be in the center of the site instead of at the periphery where it will minimize impacts to the neighbors. There are also some compatibility features associated with the building design. So this image is the west facade of the elementary school. You can see that it is stepped. It takes advantage of site topography wherever possible. The inclusion of massing variation, modulation, and articulation in building design help to reduce the perception of bulk. So some portions of the building appear far more set back, especially the taller ones, compared to some of the, I guess, masses towards the front of the facade that we're looking at. Materials were selected specifically to blend with the site context. So the applicant is choosing muted colors, a very natural looking palette with very limited kinds of accent colors that are still in that earth tone range, like rusty looking red or sunset kind of red. Their site design and their building materials also integrate some of the materials that are harvested from the site, like lumber milled from trees that will be removed, boulders, that kind of thing that are discovered during earthwork. Lighting design also also addresses compatibility. They are using full cutoff fixtures that prevents light spillover onto the adjacent properties. Their security lighting is primarily focused on the interior site features. There's no athletic lighting on the ball fields, which are the facilities that are closest to the property line. The stadium/track and tennis courts are lit, but that lighting has to comply with the sports field lighting requirements in the IMC. They're also making the athletic facilities public amenities, so the public will be able to use these facilities when they're not being used by students. So this would allow people to get onto the site to get a little exercise or to use the facilities as they like. All right, that concludes our discussion of some topics of interest. I'll talk a little bit now about the permit process and next steps. So these permits are all following a level 5 process, and everybody's responsibilities are a little bit different. So staff responsibilities are to review and make our recommendation to Development Commission. That is all documented in the staff report, all of the staff analysis, our final recommendation of approval for each of these permits, and all of the conditions that we're recommending. The Development Commission makes a recommendation and findings of fact. So responsibilities associated with that include holding the public hearing, which is what we're doing today, and as continued tomorrow and into the future as necessary. The Development Commission also closes the project record and then deliberates and makes that recommendation that gets passed along to City Council. City Council is responsible for deciding. So they take the staff recommendation, the development recommendation, and they use that closed record that was established at the Development Commission to make a decision. Once that decision is made, it is appealable to the King County Superior Court. Our recommendation is based on an analysis of the various criteria of approval applicable to the 7 different permits that are the subject of this hearing. We evaluated each of these criteria. The site development permit criteria begin on page 161. There are just 3 criteria for the SDP. And our conclusion was that as conditioned, the proposal complies with each of the applicable criteria. For the master site plan, you can reference page 154 of the staff report. There are 13 criteria that we went through that address everything from phasing to compatibility, compliance with other code requirements. And staff's conclusion is that as conditioned, the proposal will comply with all of these applicable criteria as well. So based on the applications, the submitted plans and technical reports, all of the now 105 attachments that are part of the project record, and the analysis that's presented in the staff report, the administration recommends that the Development Commission recommend approval of the MSP, the SDP, and the AASs, subject to the 52 land use conditions in the staff report. One last item of cleanup is we're actually recommending a 53rd condition of approval, which is that all conditions of approval shall be included in the covenants, conditions, and restrictions submitted prior to the issuance of the first construction permit for this project. Next steps. So after the public hearing portion of this process, the Development Commission will close the project record, make their deliberations, make a recommendation to City Council. City Council will deliberate on the project, make their decision and issue a notice of action, and then it will be appealable to King County Superior Court, as I mentioned previously, once that notice of action is issued, and that notice of action will go to all parties of record. Okay, that concludes my presentation. It is now time for Development Commission Q&A. Would you like me to stop sharing my screen, commissioners? Commissioner Brennan, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Why don't you stop sharing initially here? If somebody wants to see one of the diagrams, for example, we can pull it back up.
Great.
So thanks, Ms. Hayworth, for the great presentation and a deliberate walkthrough of the information. Commissioners, do you have questions for Ms. Hayworth? Please use the chat function and set it to all panelists so we can see, and just write question.
Chair Brennan, I see that Richard Sanford has his hand raised.
Commissioner Sanford.
Thank you, Chair Brennan. This is Richard Sanford. There were a couple of pieces that I was expecting to see among the many materials, and I may have missed them. So if I did, please let me know. I'm looking back at the last time I believe that we saw this discussion, July 15th, 2020 community conference. In those minutes, under general project lighting requirements, it says, quote, the project is required to comply with applicable standards for outdoor lighting. And it also goes on to say the applicant has not provided information about project lighting and will be required to submit a lighting plan and supporting information with the MSP SDP applications. And similarly, under sports field lighting, it says the applicant has not provided lighting information for the stadium. Goes on to say stadium lighting information must be included in the lighting plan submitted with the MSP SDP applications. And I was wondering if that information that seems to be required for this meeting is somewhere in the 5,000 pages and I overlooked it.
It is a very lengthy packet. So there is an electrical site plan. It's a 2-page document that is included as attachment 101 that does identify the lighting, the proposed lighting on page 1 and then page 2. Sorry, I've just pulled it up and it's loading. I just want to confirm what I'm telling you.
Yeah, thanks. I did
Page
see
2 is
that
the
attachment.
photometrics that show how that lighting is distributed across the site.
Okay, so that is in that attachment. I did see that one, but I didn't see really, I guess, much information about how the lighting would spill from the buildings and so on, or any of the intensities of that lighting.
So that's part of the photometric calculation that's shown on page 2. Those they're not super intuitive to read, especially because a lot of people aren't super familiar with the foot candle. But what they're showing across the site is that their lighting design does comply with the illumination requirements that are set forth in the Issaquah Municipal Code for exterior lighting or for outdoor lighting.
Okay, thank you. And regarding the sports field lighting, especially the height of the light poles on the football field?
Is there a question?
Yes, I don't see any of that information included, although in the minutes from 7:15, it says that stadium lighting information must be included in the lighting plan submitted with the MSP STP applications. Is that still part of the reference that you referred to?
It is not. We do have some additional information. This was actually included with the originally with their SEPA checklist. So attachment number 69 is a memo that summarizes athletic field lighting. They'll need to show some additional information with their construction permits. That is normal. The land use permits are a little bit more conceptual as long as they're demonstrating that they are in compliance or can reasonably comply with code requirements with or without conditions. That information is considered adequate. So they will need to provide more detailed information with their construction permits just to confirm that compliance. But we do have some information on the sports field lighting that is adequate for making a decision on the land use permits.
Okay, thank you. I'll check that attachment 69.
Yes.
And then just one more piece regarding the intersection that's proposed at 228th Avenue Southeast. I understand, is it correct that that's the responsibility of the city of Sammamish to control that intersection that's proposed to be built?
That's correct. Yes, the city of Sammamish owns the 228th Avenue Southeast right-of-way, and so they are the ones that are responsible for reviewing and issuing permits for those improvements.
Okay.
They will also be responsible for the long-term operation of that signal.
Yeah, thank you. That's my understanding. So do we have any memorandum of understanding or any other document currently between the city of Sammamish and either the city of Issaquah or ISD regarding those proposed upgrades to 228th, including the proposed new signal?
We don't currently have a memorandum of understanding. We are asking for that in our conditions of approval, and I'm trying to scroll quickly to find the right one.
Yes, and I did see that requirement in the conditions, but currently we do not have anything signed with the city of Sammamish regarding that intersection, then correct?
Correct.
I want to make sure I wasn't overlooking that. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Chair Brennan. A question that had come up from the public about Central Issaquah Design and Development Standards, Chapter 10.11, and prohibiting tree removal from a vacant lot prior to development. And the question, does that requirement then apply to the elementary school site that would have trees removed, even though the site would not be expected to be developed for several years, sounds like?
No, that specific requirement is to prevent tree, like clear cutting or tree removal on properties that aren't developed or won't be developed. The MSP specifically contemplates phasing. That's the purpose of the master site plan, is to authorize phasing over the course of years. We talked about this the tree removal on the phase 2 area, and overall this will give an opportunity to get some of that screening vegetation planted as early as possible so that it can grow as quickly as possible before those phase 2 improvements are built. It'll also replace what are some poor condition trees with much healthier trees that will be actively monitored and maintained by the school district. So there are also some advantages even to letting that tree removal and that replanting occur with the phase 1 improvements.
Thank you. And is there a requirement for construction on that site within a certain number of years? Some limit that it can stay vacant?
We have put a condition of approval relative to that. So let me just see if I can. There are quite a few conditions. Condition number 11. So under this condition of approval, the land use decisions would be valid for 3 years from the later of either application approval or the resolution of appeals. Just in case it takes, like if there is an appeal, court appeals can take a little while to resolve. And then 1-year extensions can be requested by the applicant for review by city staff before they're approved. That would then allow the city to evaluate whether construction is proceeding on pace or if they'll need to come back for a new land use process.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions from commission members? I've got a couple. Or Commissioner Morgan, did you have another question? Is that?
I did. I guess want to make clear, we'll have chances to ask questions of the applicant as well?
Yes, following the applicant's presentation, we'll have questions for the applicant. So I had a question related to a follow-up to Commissioner Morgan's question regarding the elementary school. So the condition relates to the life of essentially the decision or the permits related to the elementary school. But should they not proceed, would there be in the conditions any mitigation that would be required? Because what we'll have is a temporary condition that was anticipated with, as you mentioned, that retaining walls would be constructed in your presentation at certain locations around the proposed elementary school site. And then there would be some stockpiling. So if they don't proceed, is there, for whatever reason that might occur, they proceeded with the initial phase, but not phase 2, is there a mitigation requirement or revegetation of the property that would be necessary, or is that stated?
So this is addressed a little bit in condition 12. So this phase 2 area, once those the limited number of improvements are constructed, the stockpile has to be hydroseeded, so it will be a green mound. And it has to be fenced consistent with the aesthetic treatment on the rest of the site. So it can't just have orange construction fencing around it forever. And it has to have functional temporary erosion and sediment control measures. So those are the temporary stormwater ponds. So those are the requirements as we've contemplated them in the land use permits, but there's also some opportunity to put additional conditions related to those specific constructed features on the site work permits that authorize those initial improvements. So that gets addressed. I believe it's with site work 1.
Okay. And this may be a question that's more for the applicant following their presentation, but it's related to the lighting and the use of the lighting on sports fields and amplified sound. Limitations on the hours under which that those events, that lighting, that amplified sound can be used.
So there are some self-imposed limitations that the applicant included in their mitigation. We've also included some condition language in our recommended conditions of approval. I'll refer you to condition number. Sorry, bear with me while I'm scrolling.
That's fine. There's a lot of material with this one.
There is. It's a very lengthy staff report.
Impressive.
So we have some noise requirements that start at condition, let's see, 37. So 37 prohibits bus pre-trip bus inspections during nighttime hours, which are defined by state law, which is what the city adopts as 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So that's where the noise mitigation begins in our recommendations. We have requirements for noise monitoring in 38 and 39. And then trying to find the one. We had cannot find it, but we did have a condition that that had them turning off their sound system at 10 p.m. or as soon as the event was concluded. The sound system and using low-level lighting instead of field lighting to assist with egress.
Great. So thanks for that. I'll do a follow-up with the applicant to understand a little bit more about their plans, particularly around mitigation. There's noise monitoring, but against what standard, it's not clear. So I'll ask some follow-ups with the applicant. I'm sure their team has got some additional information to share on that. Are there other questions from commission members? Commissioner Shore, sorry.
Hello, Brooke Shore. Is now an appropriate time to make comments on the conditions themselves?
So this is really an opportunity to ask questions or clarifications. So if there's something on a condition that isn't clear or doesn't address a situation that you're thinking about, that would be it. Put it in the form of a question. I think that would help.
Okay. So for item 36, which is the lighting, similar topic as Commissioner Sanford was asking about, it says that lighting information must be submitted, but there's no criteria that would be held to. So I don't know if that should maybe be added to that condition. Something, you know, it will be submitted, and then what requirements would it be measured against?
So we would measure the performance of their selected products. So when we ask for fixture details and cut sheets, we're looking for specific product information, and we would evaluate those against the code requirements. So those are the adopted outdoor lighting standards.
Okay, and that would address light spillover to the neighboring properties, things like that?
Yes.
And then condition 38 says that noise levels should be monitored, and if the maximum allowed levels are exceeded, there would be mitigation and review for approval, but it doesn't really say that it would be implemented. So maybe just a wording thing there. And then on 39, with regards to sporting event noise, there's no action required if levels are exceeded. So it says they will be monitored, but there's no remedy if they are exceeded.
Okay. We'll look at both of those conditions.
Okay. And then I did not see any hours for events.
All
being
right.
limited.
I'll double check and I can bring some additional information about this to tomorrow's session.
Okay, thank you. That's all for now.
Other questions from the commission? Commissioner Arcata.
Give me just a moment here to unmute him.
Hello, thank you, Chair Brennan. A question on the conditional approval. With the 52 or 53 conditions, they range from design, construction, and operation. How are these conditions enforced?
They'll all have a little bit different, well, not all of them. There are a few different enforcement mechanisms. So because the city also has to issue construction permits, some of the conditions are tied to those construction permits where relevant. So perhaps additional information is required to be submitted with a specific application, and then we would use the review process of that application to resolve any issues with the information that was provided. In some cases, it might be tied to occupancy of the building. So before the school is allowed to operate, they need to demonstrate compliance with those conditions of approval. Some of them, like the noise monitoring ones that we discussed, are ongoing, and those have some regular reporting requirements for the life of the project. So it depends a little bit on the specific condition that you're looking at, but there are a variety of enforcement mechanisms that are available to the city in the event that they have demonstrated compliance with their permit applications and then something changes. The city also has the power to stop work on the construction site until a violation is resolved. So there are a lot of different options.
Does the applicant self-monitor, or is the city providing regular inspections and assessments?
As a consultant, I'm a little bit less familiar. Generally speaking, there's a building inspector, but I'd actually love to turn it over to Lucy to explain a little bit more about the city's process.
So we have inspectors in 3 categories. One is building inspectors. We have site inspectors that are looking at infrastructure, looking at the erosion control. And then we also have a planning inspector who is coordinating the landscape and other site features that are not under the review of the site inspectors.
Okay, one follow-up. When we're talking about the temporary stockpile for the excavation, and you have, I guess there's semi-temporary or permanent erosion control. Typically that requires an inspection, a regular inspection. Is that again done by the city then?
I believe it's done in combination with, typically a project of this size has its own inspector, own person who's an expert and responsible for the water quality on site, and they are coordinating regularly with the city's site inspector. And if you need more details, I'm going to phone a friend.
Okay,
Lucy,
thank you.
The city also would take complaints from adjoiners or people that notice problems on the site. Is that right?
Sure.
So if somebody notices something, they can report it.
Are there any other questions from the commission?
One follow-up.
Okay, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, Commissioner Shore, and as far as the enforcement of the conditions, could you maybe restate the added item 53 and explain how, does that strengthen enforcement of the conditions? Is that something that's unusual or is that standard?
Okay, so the additional condition number, where'd you go? 53 is that the conditions of approval shall be included in the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or CC&Rs, submitted prior to the issuance of the first construction permit for the project. That's the language of the condition. And that, so that CC&R document is like a CC&R document if any of you lives in an HOA or something like that. Those are private rules. So in the event that there's a violation of the CC&Rs, it would be like a private property issue. It provides one more enforcement mechanism compared to not having it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shore. Are there other questions from the commission before we move to the applicant's presentation? I'm seeing none. We've been almost an hour and a half here. We're going to be going until about 10. This is probably a good spot. Just take a quick break. Let's just say until let's see what time we have. About until 8:35. So almost a 10-minute break, so we can stretch our legs a minute and keep our attention focused. So we'll recess until 8:35. Take a Okay, we have returned from recess, so hopefully everybody had a chance to stretch their legs. I know I needed. I've been sitting in a chair all day today. So it's an opportunity now to hear from the applicant. So if the applicant would present the information that you would like to present to the commission this evening and introduce your team, that would be helpful. So I'm not sure who on the applicant team is taking lead, but please introduce yourself and proceed.
Good evening, members of the Development Commission, city staff, and other residents of Issaquah. My name is Tom Mullins. I'm the Director of Capital Projects at the Issaquah School District. First, I wanted to thank the city staff and the ISD team for getting us to this juncture in the project. A lot of hard work has happened since the initial pre-application over 2.5 years ago. Representing the school district for tonight's presentation will be Ron Thiele, Superintendent of the Issaquah School District, Michael Davis, Bassetti Architects, Jordan Keel with Bassetti Architects, Todd Sowen, AHBL, Marnie Heffron, Heffron Transportation, Denise Stiffarm, School District Legal Counsel. First up will be Superintendent Thiele. He will be speaking from his phone tonight due to an unstable internet connection. Superintendent Thiele, take it away.
I'm not sure if folks can hear me.
Yes, we
Yes,
Can you all
can.
we can hear you fine.
Wonderful, thank you. My name is Ron Thiele, and I'm the superintendent of the Issaquah School District. I do apologize if I'm a little clunky with my remarks tonight. I'm not very familiar with this format, and as Tom mentioned, as luck would have it, I lost my internet connection right as the meeting was starting earlier tonight. So I am on my phone, so thank you for putting up with me a bit. I also want to start by thanking the city staff for their extensive work with the district's project team. I also want to thank the Development Commission for your careful review and consideration of this proposal. In a few moments, I'll turn this over to the district's design team to walk through the technical elements of the project. But I'd first like to present some background and touch on a few of the project planning components. There's extensive documentation in the project record of our district's search for needed school sites. But I'd like to share again why the project is designed in this location is critical to our community's needs. This site was identified following an extensive property search across our district that began some 10 years ago in 2012. At that time, King County adopted policies limiting new schools to urban lands and directing cities to consider zoning and development code mechanisms to facilitate school siting. For our district, we face the dual challenge of having only a third of our land mass within the urban area and a very competitive development environment. We also needed to locate a site large enough for a high school program. This property, when located, fit our list of needs. First, it is geographically centered between our two overcrowded high schools and near identified high school and elementary student needs. And second, its size allows us to site a high school using the city's compact school regulations and also take advantage of shared space opportunities for a co-located elementary school. The property was under contract and in early permitting stages for a large residential subdivision when the district filed a condemnation petition in 2016. I anticipate you'll hear in public comment that our district is either no longer planning for or doesn't need a new elementary school, and that our proposal should not include the planning for that school. That is false. We announced as a district in December of 2021 that we were delaying the elementary school construction from its original schedule. That announcement identified the reasons for the delay. The first reason is because our elementary enrollment has declined over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the announcement recognized this phenomena has relieved some of the existing strain on our elementary school facilities. The announcement also identified that project costs have increased considerably since the 2016 bond as a result of delays, in part due to litigation before and after we acquired the property, related inflation, added permitting costs, and new site requirements. Nonetheless, with recent and ongoing new development, as well as the return to in-person learning, we expect elementary enrollment growth to return to pre-pandemic levels in the coming years, and we must continue to plan for that. At the same time, our high school enrollment growth remained steady and exceeded projections for this year. We needed these two new schools in 2016 when they were proposed, and that need continues to exist. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that we have and will continue to use a Band-Aid approach with portables at both the elementary and high school level to deal with capacity needs while we wait for these two new schools. Portables are intended to be a temporary capacity solution. Student learning in portable classrooms is not ideal. It removes students from the main school building, often requires students to travel a distance outdoors during the school day, and overtaxes the school's core facilities, including gymnasiums, lunchrooms, bathrooms, and special purpose rooms. I'll also note that portable classrooms can present some additional security challenges that we must consider and address as part of our campus's overall security plan. As a district administrator and leader in the ISD, I want to see all of our students learning in the intended school building whenever possible. I also want to address a few of the points we've heard about the high school programming needs. In 2016, our voters approved a bond package by over 70% that included the district's 4th comprehensive high school and the need, based upon our growing high school enrollment, to provide a full high school facility and program similar to those at Issaquah, Liberty, and Skyline High Schools. We are in desperate need today of additional high school capacity, and that need will only grow. We are currently over permanent capacity at Issaquah and Skyline by more than 635 students, meaning that Skyline High School and Issaquah High School have larger student enrollment than their built capacities. And being nearly 20% over permanent capacity results in very crowded hallways and common spaces. And you might imagine how that felt to people when they returned to in-person learning during the pandemic. As we were trying to keep physical distance, it was very challenging in our overcrowded schools. Moreover, these overcrowded schools also limit teacher planning and preparation space, create supervision challenges, and frankly, wear out the buildings faster. It's also important to acknowledge that I've heard from many in our school community that they expect that their student will have all the same opportunities and experiences at any of our neighborhood high schools, regardless of where they live in the district. I think it's important also to remember that these students are already in our system, and the communities around Issaquah High School and Skyline High School are bearing the brunt of the overcrowding, not only with overcapacity schools, but with related traffic issues and parking issues, just to name a couple of the neighborhood impacts. We also know that there have been questions about why this proposal includes a multi-purpose field with a grandstand when we also have similar facilities at Skyline and Issaquah High School. As a practical matter, in order to satisfy physical education requirements, which are state mandated requirements, and provide students with equal access to extracurricular programs as students at the other schools, we would need land for the field and the track, as well as ball fields, even without the covered grandstand. Our school play fields throughout the district are heavily scheduled with school and community use. Schools by default are the primary community play field providers, and we are happy to contribute this community asset. In no case would we ever consider busing students to another location for physical education, and it is very difficult and expensive to bus students on and off their campus for athletics, activities, practices, and events. That scenario would severely compromise the program requirements, unnecessarily disrupt our students' educational experience, and would also create unnecessary traffic impacts. Again, we've also heard from our community a repeated message of equity among our schools. That is, that students at one school have access to the same programmatic benefits of students at a like school. As the design team will explain, the multipurpose field incorporates specific design and operational features to minimize operational impacts to the surrounding properties. Finally, I want to share some of the district's efforts at community outreach and as we attempt to hear neighbors' concerns. With the development of any school site, we know that it's important and our obligation to work with the neighborhood. Our 3 other comprehensive high schools and our project-based high school, as well as many of our other schools, are in residential neighborhoods. We've tried as best as possible with this project to be responsive, even with years of litigation and challenges. In 2016, when we first started review of this property, I personally spoke with a number of residents of the Providence Point community through their Kiwanis Club. I frequently give presentations there over the years. I spoke on the phone directly with other Providence Point's residents as well. I will note that when the schools were an idea, the feedback was generally positive, especially when people heard that if not schools, it was likely to be a large subdivision. At that point, during the city's review of the proposed rezone, we met, oh, I apologize, I missed a piece there. We struggled because of the litigation related to the acquisition of the property. We weren't able to re-engage with the neighbors until 2019, when we finally acquired the property. At that point, during the city's review of the proposed rezone, we met with the HOA board representatives of the Providence Point community on at least 6 different occasions, including 3 visits from me and 2 of my board members, our past board presidents, that occurred at the Providence, those meetings, 3 of those meetings occurred at Providence Point, so we could walk their property and actually enter some of their buildings to help visualize the concerns. We went up to some of the upper floors and we're looking out in the direction of where the proposed school sites would be. We've also heard public input in various forms since then, including the community conference, environmental meeting, and during the SEPA review process. We've heard the community's concerns, and those concerns have had a direct impact on the proposed design. In December of 2019, during the comprehensive plan and rezone process, I sent a letter to the City Council, the City of Issaquah Council, committing to several measures in response to expressed public comments regarding the district's planned development of the property. We've made additional modifications in commitments as we've listened to the subsequent public input. These commitments have been difficult to achieve on this site as design has evolved, but nonetheless, we've held firm in achieving all of those commitments. The design team will walk through these project components and compromises in more detail for you. We know that it's not easy to plan and implement needed community infrastructure and educational programs. However, it is an obligation that we share with the City of Issaquah as directed by the city's comprehensive plan, and one that I and our school board members embrace fully for the benefit of our district community. Again, we appreciate the Development Commission's careful and thorough review of this project. This concludes my remarks, and now I'll pass it back over to our design team. And thank you for this opportunity.
Todd Sowen. or I guess it would be Michael Davis next, correct?
Yes, thanks, Tom. Can everyone hear me okay? First off, thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm Michael Davis. I'm the design principal with Bassetti Architects. From the start of this project, our team has been inspired by the natural beauty of the greater Issaquah and Sammamish areas. From the development within the urban core that transitions into the less dense housing at its edges, to the wonderful parks, forests, and mountains that surround and define the area. We wanted our new school campus to reflect the beauty of greater Issaquah. Through our project exploration, we came up with the concept of a school campus as a park in the Pacific Northwest Cascades. To achieve this, we needed to think of the primary elements of the campus a little differently. The entry sequence needed to reflect that of entering a state park or driving up to Tiger Mountain Summit Trailhead. Similarly, the parking lots would need to be redefined as areas under a developing tree canopy rather than a barren landscape dominated by asphalt. These are just a few examples of the design moves that would need to be done to change the essence of a school campus into a park. Next slide, please. When we started looking into the history of the surrounding area, we started seeing some additional themes that we wanted to build upon. The area early on grew around the mining industry and transitioned largely to the logging industry. Large swaths of area have been logged, replanted, and logged again. Additionally, built environments such as Providence Heights College have come and gone, further changing the history, the landscape, and nature of the area. A common theme that we were seeing was the idea of regeneration, and more specifically, that of a regenerating forest. Next slide, please. When you look at Pacific Northwest forest typologies, there are 4 specific areas that are prominent and transition from one form to the other through time. These are the images on the left: the clearings, regenerating forests, new growth, and existing forest. Looking at aerial photographs from our site spanning from 1936 to 2018, you can see how it's changed, adapted, and regenerated. This diagram represents the 1936 site, where there are remnants of logging and areas that had recently been cleared. Next slide, please. In 2018, you can see the result of an empty college campus with zones of new growth in the areas that had been previously clear cut. Next slide. Our proposed new site looks to weave a new school campus and focus on regenerating the site and creating a park-like atmosphere that grows with time. Next slide.
Excuse me, Michael, this is the
Yeah.
clerk.
Yes.
I've been asked to see if we could expand your presentation at all visually, if that's possible, Todd.
Todd, can you go to presentation mode maybe?
I thought it was in presentation mode. View mode. I think I could hide. I'm not sure where that button is.
If you go to view, let's see here. Maybe on the right-hand side, Todd. You may just want to zoom in on the images if possible.
Yeah, it's just gonna cut off some of the text. I can zoom in as you start talking about stuff.
Todd, if it's helpful, this is the clerk. I'm being told the window view might be of use. And again, this was just a request, so please proceed if it's not possible.
I'm just gonna move forward then, Todd, if you want to check under window tab. Go, presentation mode was under there. Oh, that works perfectly. Thank you. This is our current proposed site plan for the campus. Critical elements include a high school, future elementary school, a track and athletic fields, and 4 tennis courts. Based on the size and complexity of the site and our team's goals to create generous site buffers, other typical program elements you would see in a school campus, such as practice soccer fields, generous softscape play areas for elementary students, have been omitted. In addition to the regenerating forest concept, the site has also been developed around a number of programmatic priorities. These include student safety and security, indoor and outdoor educational opportunities, proper school zoning, and safe vehicular and pedestrian circulation. Specifically, vehicle, bus, and pedestrian circulation have been huge drivers of the site's layout. To allow for proper queuing distances and minimizing congestion of vehicles and pedestrians, the buildings and fields have been strategically placed to meet the goals of the district. Primary access point is off 228th. It brings in visitors onto a tree-lined campus boulevard that curves up the hill that largely matches the existing grades of the site. At the first intersection, the campus boulevard continues to the south to the entry plaza of the high school, with the parking and tennis courts stepping down the hill to the east. To the west, the football field, track, and athletic plaza separates the elementary and high school buildings and allows for minimized conflicts between the two facilities. When students arrive on buses, they move through the campus boulevard to a bus-only zone that allows for safe drop-off for elementary students at the hardscape play area and for high school students at the South Student Entry Plaza. As I mentioned, next slide, please. As I mentioned a moment ago, the site has a lot of complexity and has shaped a good portion of our proposed plan. For example, there's a significant amount of topography to our site. There's over 100 foot of grade change between the low point at 228th and to the high point of the current water tower. Next slide. Our site access is constrained based on required intersection spacing from 40th Street and the significant grades along 228th to the south. Next slide. Finally, tree retention requirements limits where we can develop on site. We had to strategically place the majority of our campus on existing clearings in order to achieve our retention targets. With that, I'm going to pass it to Todd.
Thanks, Michael. So I'm going to start with going back to kind of where we started on this project and talk about the history a little bit and how we got to where we are from a program standpoint and some of those things we've given up along the way. So on the left, you'll see a site plan from 2019 from the first pre-application meeting we have with the city. This had the code required buffers were pushed up against the property line, making elevation differences between uses with open spaces that we were available to use. Through working with the staff and when we came and I guess talked to you guys last time in 2020 at our community conference, we heard that trees were really important and we needed to push to try to save more tree areas. So you'll see on the right, the site plan creates significant additional buffers, but that didn't come at no cost. That really had a lot of hiccups along the way for us as a design team. You heard Ron talk about some of the program losses and the costs that have gone up along those ways. And so I'm going to kind of talk about those specific pieces along with the mitigation for the project. So the first part I'm going to talk about is the buffer. So we definitely heard from all of the neighbors that the buffers are really important and we need to try to save as many existing trees as possible as outlined in the city code. So we've done that by pushing our project closer together, moving the elementary school closer to 228 to create additional buffer along the edges. We've created retaining walls at the edges of our proposed improvements, which make really hard edges, but allows us to save significant numbers of trees with not grading in those buffer areas. The buffers we are maintaining, we're replanting the areas that were previously disturbed. There was a road that ran along this edge that Christina had in her slide. We're going to remove the asphalt and replant that area. There's a portion of sticker bushes we're going to remove. There's some just vacant spots in the buffer. We're going to replant all those. That buffer will be irrigated as part of the construction project with temporary irrigation. We've chosen native vegetation to allow something that won't need to be irrigated forever, but we need enough irrigation to get it started and make sure those plants have a healthy life. We've also proposed along the baseball field, we switched the elevations of the baseball field from the last plan I had up so that we have the outfield facing the Bellwood property in 228. That allowed us to drop the retaining wall height slightly. And we're also providing a green wall along the north side of Bellwood to limit the view of that wall that they'll be seeing from their property. We're still far exceeding the code required minimums of 7-foot setbacks. We have an average of 68 feet across our buffer area. And that buffer will be in an easement to be maintained in perpetuity of the property. Some other reductions that we've had as part of this process, the elementary school playground area became smaller as we gave up more property. We ended up with more walls, not only on the exterior of the site, but also internal as you start pushing these flat spaces next to each other to make up the 100 feet of grade difference that Michael mentioned. We have to start stepping down the hill. And so we did that with a series of walls. A number of the walls, the tiering of the walls was taken out as part of this design process to, again, save additional trees and cut down on some of those areas. Some other things we saw change was the elementary or the tennis courts. We originally had 6 tennis courts. Now we have 4. So that's going to make it really hard for the district to run tournaments and things in the future. The outfield for the baseball field is 280 feet. Normally we shoot for about 320 for a high school baseball field. So that's definitely a reduction in program. This site does not have any practice fields, which is something that the district has at their other fields in the area. We do have portables as required by the state for programming of an elementary school, but we don't have area to expand that elementary school in the future. That was something we lost as part of making the buffers bigger. So the next thing I want to talk through is the grading a little bit. So Michael mentioned we had 100 feet of elevation difference. Trying to take a lot of flat surface areas and access them from a fire constraint. We have road constraints and ADA constraints that we're allowed to do. It becomes really difficult to slope between those facilities, which was driving those walls and trying to balance earthwork on this site. So we're not hauling a whole bunch of dirt to a neighboring facility is something that we've definitely worked through. As part of our project, we'll come back to the frontage improvement piece towards the end, and Marnie will talk about kind of the big picture, but our improvements along 228 limited where we could save trees along that edge. So the required frontage improvement cut into that slope, and as a result has a reduction in trees that we're working through. So this is our proposed site plan. Christina noted that we're saving an existing wetland. In this location, we've previously mitigated wetland C, which we are proposing to fill on the edge of the site. So I wanted to talk through the stormwater piece that Christina mentioned that we were going to get into in detail. So I'm going to start from a downstream analysis perspective. Where does the water go? And then we'll get into what our proposed improvements along the way are and how we're exceeding the code requirements. So our site is on the upper right portion of this screen. These blue lines are where we discharge from the site. And we've specifically zoomed into the south side because it's fairly interesting. On the next slide, I'll show what happens from the north. But so we discharged to 3 different downstreams from this portion. So we have a portion of our site, the elementary school sits about right here, that goes to the north and out. We have a portion that goes directly west, down, and then 2 portions that go to the south. So we south through Providence Point out to 43rd, and then a portion of our corner of our site goes directly to 43rd and down. So these two downstreams converge within the quarter mile, therefore considered one drainage basin. For our next site, the red line on this is Laughing Jacobs Creek. So we discharge, I noted on the last one, we have a portion of our site that comes here, portion here, portion here. The portion to the north goes through this development and ends up at Laughing Jacobs Creek as well. So all of our water ends up in Laughing Jacobs Creek, all at different locations, and it's really important from a stormwater standpoint not to take water from one area, put it in a different one, and increase velocities and scouring and all those pieces. Throughout the process, we've met with the Kokanee group, discussed our project and what impacts we could potentially have as a hope of mitigating those things, and we believe we've done that. So in our historic condition, we have water that discharges towards Providence Point. All of this basin discharges that direction. The dark blue is impervious surface that when the college campus was constructed, discharged that direction. The lighter green surface is landscaped and forested areas that drain that direction. In our proposal, we're matching the historic runoff from those areas as required by code. So we are discharging the buffer itself to its existing condition, and then two portions of the elementary school out that direction. All of the red area is being redirected out to 228th and around Providence Point in the conveyance system that was recently constructed with the city's project. So this map shows kind of how we're doing that. So we have a series of detention systems that are located throughout the site. The idea is try to deal with the water as close to where it falls as possible. It makes the cheapest option for the school district. It also makes it so if you had maintenance issues, you're not dealing with the entire stormwater for the entire site in one spot. So these two blue systems discharge to the Providence Point area. So this to the north to that previous map, if you can remember that, wrapped around and down. This system just below it discharges directly to the west and out. All three of these red systems discharge out to 228th and across. And these three green systems, the north green system is actually the system for the improvements in 228th, discharge to the drainage. There's an existing drainage channel that goes under 228th and down through that development. It's in an easement and riprap line. This map, I think, does a really good job of explaining what we're doing from a stormwater standpoint. So this site was previously developed. It has some historical runoff that it's had since the 50s, since the college was constructed. So this first piece of this table is the runoff rates for individual storm events from the existing site. The next column is the pre-developed or forested rate from the site. That'd be the code required numbers that we're following. So for the 2-year, 5, 10, 15, or 5, 25, 50, and 100-year storm events, which are the code required storm events we look at. So the next one is our developed condition of what we actually release at. And then you'll see we have a significant reduction from the historical level, which you would expect. We had a lot of runoff when the site was originally developed. We're going to take it back to a forested condition. We're going to significantly reduce the stormwater coming off this site. The final piece, this column is the reductions for what the pre-developed would be, and that would be the forested condition. So by code, we were below what would be allowed by code from a stormwater standpoint. This graph below summarizes this. So the blue line is the historical rates. The orange is what would be allowed by code, and the gray is what we're proposing to discharge. A lot of this has to do with the evolution of codes over the last 20 years. Stormwater is going to come a really long ways from a code standpoint and how we model it and understanding what's actually going to happen on a site. And as a result, we're going to have the cleanest stormwater in this basin because this is the newest technology that we can use for this site. And we really believe that our system is going to reduce flows to Laughing Jacobs. We're going to see a reduction in velocities leaving our site, and as a result, there'll be less scouring and erosion in the creek at those discharge locations. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the elementary school phase. So the first discussion of why we're phasing the site. So the elementary school site, as currently designed with all of the elevation differences on the site, is a fill. So we're cutting the top of this hillside, putting the material where the elementary school ends up being. So if we don't build the elementary school, we have about 20,000 yards of dirt that we would have to find a home for. That's approximately 800 truck and trailers leaving our site. When the elementary school got constructed in the future, we would have to go find dirt to refill that site and make it usable, which would be importing that same amount of dirt, which would be not only an economic problem for the school district to pay to discharge, to get rid of the dirt and then pay to get new dirt. It's also an environmental impact from trucking and all the other pieces that would happen to make that work. So we do think from an environmental standpoint, filling the elementary school site now, building the retaining walls, getting the buffers around those system completed now is the right thing to do. We're going to take that to subgrade. We're going to hydroseed the entire area upon stabilization. We need to hydroseed and stabilize it so that we're not out having to check on it on a daily basis. So we'll be monitoring it and all the things we need to do, but the more vegetation we can get to grow on this site in the interim until it actually gets constructed, the better. There will be some stockpiling of materials to fill in the temporary ponds and things as part of construction. One of the questions that was asked to the city was the stockpile of materials and what would happen if the permit expired. I think our approach would be that stockpile materials would go away if that was needed, or if the elementary school wasn't built in the time frame outlined. The site will include temporary stormwater discharges as shown on that previous map. So we're going to build, because we don't want to go back in the buffer, we're going to build all the individual discharge pipes away from our site. So the temporary ponds will connect to those. They'll use the ultimate discharge control structures to make sure that we're matching the allowable runoff rates. Another thing we've heard from the neighbors was the lead contamination under the water tank. And it's something that we've studied, we've extensively studied, trying to verify what the right amount of dirt to strip out of there is. So where we ended up on a SEPA mitigation measure is we're going to stockpile, remove the material under the water tank. We're going to stockpile that material and test it, verify what we need to do to get rid of it. We'll get rid of that material. Once that material is removed, we're also going to test the subgrade under it and make sure we got it all. If we don't get all of the lead, we're going to keep stripping material until we have a clean site. We're going to submit to Ecology for a no further action letter, which basically says we have a clean site. Obviously, the school district is not going to cut corners. We're trying to educate students and keep them safe. So making sure that we get the site completely cleaned and don't have any outstanding issues, really desirable. The structured parking, Christina mentioned we were doing a shared parking agreement between the two sites. So each individual facility has been designed so that on a daily basis, it meets the requirements of parking. For large events, either at the elementary school or at the high school, we're going to flexibly park between those two facilities. And the district has an operational plan to make sure they don't schedule two events at the same time and cause a parking issue for themselves. The Prior to the elementary school being built, we have additional temporary parking available in the bus loops that we haven't counted. So we meet the parking requirements even without the elementary school parking being constructed in this first phase. I'm going to turn it over to Marnie to talk about our specific traffic improvements.
Good evening, everyone. I am Marnie Heffron. I am the principal and founder of Heffron Transportation. We are traffic engineering and transportation planning experts and have been doing this type of work for school projects for 35 years. So before I get into my presentation, I do want to note one correction for both the city as well as the Development Commission, and that is a reference on page 72 of this document. It's section 7A 13, where the traffic summary is, and it has a list of references that were relied upon for this. And the very first bullet in that list of references actually refers to a report that has been superseded. The revised report, it's the Transportation Technical Report, and it has been revised, and the date of that report is February 16th, 2021. It has been submitted. In fact, it's referenced later on in the city's transportation conditions, so I know that it's part of the package. So we'll work with the city to make sure that that reference is updated and that their attachments are pointing to that correct report. Little bit of context on the transportation. It was noted earlier that the site is in the city of Issaquah, but the frontage street 228th is actually within the city of Sammamish's jurisdiction. So we have, as part of our work, done extensive coordination with the city of Sammamish related to the traffic operations as well as the design of this improvement. I'll get into that a little bit further. Couple of things about the school site. Although we do have 2 schools on this site, the bell schedules are such that the traffic does not coincide when you're arriving and departing. The high school traffic will come first in the morning, followed by the elementary school, and then on the in the afternoon, they also leave at different times of day. The whole internal circulation system that Todd has shown you on prior plans has all been designed to make sure that we, to as much as we can, we separate pedestrian and vehicle conflict points. We've intentionally set up counterclockwise loops that then allow you to kind of minimize those conflicts. And then, as Todd just alluded, the parking on the site is shared when you need additional parking for events. So the co-location actually works very well for a transportation paradigm. I'll go through some of the major conditions. Todd has talked about an event management plan. Those are prescribed in conditions 15 and 16. And the intent of those plans is to make sure that the schools coordinate their event schedules. They don't have large events that occur on the same night. And there will also be provisions that if they have the very, very large all school events, that there are measures that are taken to make sure that we don't have overspill parking. Condition 17 is a transportation management plan, and that's where we have school operation policies, the encouragement of students and to ride buses or to carpool to school. It also is where all of the directives that we provide to parents on how they should drive and pick up and do the load unload on this site. And then there will also be a monitoring provision to monitor traffic after the school opens. And there is another correction I request to make to the monitoring, and that would be the section F or X of the staff report. And it's the, let me just find it, I believe it's It's condition number 17. Yes, I believe it's condition number 17. Or is it 18? Todd, where's the monitoring in here?
I believe it's 18.
I think it's 18. There's some leftover text that we believe was associated with the middle school 6 project. The monitoring should be done for one intersection, which is the single access point onto 228th. And since it's in the city of Sammamish, the threshold should be a level of service E and not a level of service D. So we'll also work with the city to have that correction made. So here is the frontage improvement along 228th. We call it a frontage improvement, but this is much more than that. It is a full roadway improvement, both sides of the center line. It also includes sidewalks on both sides of 228th between the side driveway and 40th. Todd, if you can use your mouse to show that where 40th is at the north end, that's beyond the north edge of the school and all the way down to where the widening has just occurred at Providence Point. So this is about a 1,700-foot section of road improvement with sidewalks. It will be widened from its current 2-lane configuration out to 4 lanes. And then at the site driveway, there's an extra dual northbound left turn lane so that school traffic can turn left into the site, and a southbound right turn lane to get into the site. And that intersection will also be signalized with full pedestrian signalized crossings. And our analysis, which considers kind of the peak 20 minutes when high school and elementary school are arriving and departing, this intersection operates at a very good level of service. We call it level of service B, which is on a same as a school grade, A through F. B is very good. And at times when the school traffic isn't there, so during commuter peak hours, it operates even better. So let's get some more details on this. You have a couple of there we go. There's the cross section. You can see that in addition at the edges, there's 5-foot shoulder areas for a bike lane as well. So this is really a full urban cross section that's all along the site's frontage. Next picture. This is a diagram of the intersection at 40th Street and 228th. The city of Sammamish did not want to have this intersection signalized with the fear that a signal would draw more traffic through that local residential neighborhood. So we worked very closely with them to design a configuration that would both meet their level of service requirements as well as keep that cut through traffic at a minimum. This is where the widened section in front of the school will then transition back to the existing roadway configuration until at some future date, the city of Sammamish does have plans to widen that. We do want to make clear that these plans have been very closely coordinated with the city of Sammamish, and the full set has been submitted to them for review, and that review is ongoing. And Todd, do you have a close-up of the driveway as well? There is a close-up. Again, this is a very large. It would be a very good operation during school as well as commuter peak periods. So as we said, we've gone through a a lot of very detailed operations analysis. We've worked with the city to look at different operations paradigms, different attendance and enrollment capture areas to make sure that this intersection has resiliency for the future. And is our belief that this will operate much better in the future with the project than it does under current conditions. So Todd, back to you.
Thanks, Marnie. One thing I want to make sure we touch on that's been quite the process to get transportation and everyone to sit in a room and come to an agreement on what those improvements needed to look like. It is something we got through during the pandemic. We made a formal submittal October of 2021. We're expecting comments from the city of Sammamish any day on the first round of their reviews as part of that. A couple other things I wanted to talk about. The elementary school site. So condition 11 of the staff report requires removal of the stockpile material. So I mentioned that we were going to voluntarily do that. That's actually a condition outlined, not just us voluntarily doing that. The city has conditioned us to that effect as well. And then condition 2 incorporates all of the SEPA conditions that the school district put on themselves. So I think that's important to note that not only did the school district come up with, through the process of what those conditions needed to be, the city is going to help us make sure that we enforce all of those. So really excited to see that as part of the process. The other piece, the elementary school site will have utilities constructed through it. So there's a water and a sewer line that go through that to create loops from the neighboring system that will serve the school. So if we didn't fill that site, those utilities would have to be put in and ripped out and potentially reinstalled. So there's some other reasons beyond just the dirt work piece of needing to fill that site. The other piece I wanted to talk about a little bit was the noise from the site. So we do have a SEPA condition that we're going to monitor noise. The staff report has a similar condition that we're going to go do that. The code requirements for daytime sound levels of 57 decibels at the property line is what we're going to limit our sound system to. We're going to turn it off at 10 p.m. is what we've agreed to in our SEPA conditions. We'd also have nighttime sound levels, but with that system turned off, we don't believe we'll be anywhere near that. And the school operating past 10 p.m. other than a handful of times if, an extended football game or something we don't expect. So not seeing that would be an issue. So with that, I really thank you guys for your time. Really happy to have gotten this far. It's been a long process. Like I mentioned, we started with a pre-application in 2019 and came and saw you guys in 2020. So excited to see this finally get to the point where we can talk about what it's going to take to get it built. So thank you and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Todd, and the rest of the team from the school district. So this is an opportunity for commission members to ask questions of the school district team. So if you'll put in the chat question, if you have questions, and then I'll call on you and we can proceed that way. Anybody have a question for the district team? So I've got one question. I'll get started here, give people a chance to get their thoughts straight. It is related to the traffic and specifically the study, and I didn't have a chance to go through all the details of the traffic study. I did look at it, and that is related to the Southeast 40th Street. And you were talking about access based on the reconfiguration of 100 or of 228, improving access, but curious about the study and what it anticipates for cut-through traffic, because I know that is a concern from some in the neighborhood served by Southeast 40th Street. So what would be anticipated in the way of traffic impacts and what mitigation would address that concern. If you could be a little more specific about that, maybe Ms. Heffron?
So we did quite a few studies about the potential for cut through. That neighborhood is part of the attendance area for the high school. There are currently buses that are already going and picking up students within that neighborhood and delivering them out through the 228th intersection. So that was some of the questions that we got from the city of Sammamish, like, will we have more buses going through that neighborhood? And the answer is no. But concerned that if it got too easy to go through 40th and make that left turn onto 228th, that it might attract more traffic that's not school related through that intersection. So the configuration that we came up with is a concept that we call a flying T, and you see this more and more often. If you're out driving around, you've seen other intersections configured like this, where the center turn lane is actually partitioned off from the through traffic, so that you only really have to get a gap in one direction of traffic to make your left turn. So it will be easier to make that left turn compared to the current configuration, where you need to get a gap in both directions of traffic. But we don't think that it'll be enough of an advantage to really attract cut through traffic through that neighborhood.
Thank you. That's also a really quick follow-up. So in the diagram that you showed, so you just described there's a physical barrier when you're making that left-hand turn out of Southeast 40th between the southbound traffic on 228 and the lane that you're entering, making that left turn.
Correct. And then because it transitions directly into our widened section, that own lane, and then the through traffic stays in its own lane, and then they can sort themselves out in that nearly 500 feet between there and the school driveway.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Commissioner Sanford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, I think this may be for Mr. Sowen, regarding the lighting. I see in attachment 69, I think it shows pole heights, lights around football field and track of 80 to 90 feet high. Is that correct? And it also says the lighting system utilizes fully shielded LED luminaires with extended visors to ensure there will be no point off the site where the light source fixture glare will be visible. Could you talk about that a little bit, please?
Absolutely. So we are using taller poles than you would have seen, years ago. So it used to be you did school lighting, field lighting with 40 or 50 foot tall poles. We now do 70 to 80 normally. The reason is you're shining more down on the facility and you get less glare into the neighbors. I've got an exhibit that I'm going to share, which I'm sure I'll have to add to the record. Is that okay?
We will have to add it to the record. So, but yes, you can share it.
I think it's actually part of the record anyway, but I'll,
Okay.
I think this will probably do a pretty good job of explaining what I'm trying to say. So taller poles, so if we had a shorter pole, you'd be, projecting across to this area, and then you'd have light spill off the side of this. And our facility is really, really far from the neighbors where we're actually doing this lighting. But so the taller the poles are, the more downward light we have. The outside of the track will actually be relatively dark from a practical standpoint. So, but this does a pretty good job of explaining it. This is part of the lighting study that was included in SEPA, so I can add this as well if it's not part of the record.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And it says extended visors to ensure there'll be no point off the site where the light source will be visible. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Are there other questions from commission members?
Chair Brennan, I do have one. This is Mel Morgan.
Go ahead.
A couple questions, actually. So one of my biggest concerns is the retaining wall at the baseball field. As I understand, it's a 38-foot tall retaining wall, which is getting up to a 3 to 4 story building height. One question I had about it was, I think in the plans we have, it's page L 1.9 LU, and it shows the walls that are along 228th. The top of that wall is at 437. And then for the baseball field retaining wall, the bottom of that wall is at 437, which makes it sound like there's going to be level ground between the top of the retaining wall at the street and the bottom of the retaining wall at the baseball field. But it seemed like that area, when you look at the topographic survey, is sloped. And so I'm wondering how we go from a steeply sloped area to where the top of the wall, bottom of the wall are the same, so that would have to be flattened out.
I'm just pulling up an exhibit so I can make sure I'm talking to the same piece you are.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, So which sheet were you looking at that had the?
It's L 1.9 LU.
Oh, I opened this. Sorry, I opened the civil plans. Let me open the landscape plans.
Okay. It was, and that's from the large set of plans that we got a while back.
Absolutely.
I've been getting a workout turning those pages.
It's a big plan set. A lot of information. I'm not seeing, oh, maybe it's right here. Wall diagram. I found it.
Yeah, I think it's the wall diagram.
Yeah, I found it. So
Yeah.
let me put this back over and we can talk through.
Right.
Share. It'll be- So the height of this, you're talking this piece to that piece.
Yeah, if I'm reading that right, the top of one wall 437, the bottom of the baseball wall 437.
Yeah, so this 437 contour actually wraps around and makes it, so the road, it's a little complicated. The road's sloping down the hill. And this, so this portion of the wall that's directly across from it is up the hill from that. There's a low spot in this wall. You can see where the contours dip in here. So this is
Okay.
the tallest part of the wall. So we do have one spot that's 38 feet tall, which is right there. If you trace this 38 contour back, it goes over to here, which is how we got that piece. But so the baseball field is a relatively flat object, right?
Uh-huh.
It's got some grade across it, but we actually match grade pretty close. So we are at like 77 for the elevation of the baseball field, and the existing grade, like 477, and the existing grades right here are like 475. So we match pretty close here. The problem is when you carry that elevation out at 1.5% down, we end up, this crosses a ton of contours, and so you end up with a retaining wall here. There is a point where the retaining wall is 38 feet tall right there, but as you get around to this corner and closer to Bellwood, we're actually like 18 feet tall here.
Oh, okay.
It dies into the hillside, and you can see the wall actually ends when we come around this corner. So it's somewhat a issue of having existing slopes across that area. And then we did go back and agree to make this wall, a green screen wall that'll have live plants and things on it to break up that portion, and then replant a portion of the buffer along here to make sure that we have as much of a vegetated buffer as possible.
Okay, so I'd heard that in the presentation, the green screen wall. And so that is, in the staff report, I think it showed the sort of just the cement blocks, the shape blocks. So it'd be a little different that you would have some vegetation on it.
We would, and we're looking at a couple of different options for that wall. But yeah, it will be a wall with vegetation on it. The district added that as a SEPA condition. And as I mentioned, so the staff report by reference.
Okay.
As well.
That'll be great. I think partly just in helping the potential for graffiti too.
Absolutely.
Then this is maybe a very minor item, but on if you can pull up L2.6 LU.
Yep.
Right there. So right at the if you move the cursor up a little bit where that V notch is, just to the right there, if I understand it right from looking at the aerials and so forth, that's right about where there's a driveway entrance to a building within Providence Point there.
Yeah, the driveway is actually right here.
Yeah. And then when I was looking at the trees that are going in there, the trees that, for the most part, that are right in front of that are deciduous. And you're fairly looking straight over to the south entrance to the building there, and the buses coming by and so forth. And wondering, is that something that the landscaper, because that's probably one of the places where you've got people closest to the buildings. Can those be made to all be evergreen trees to give a permanent blockage between the neighboring property and the school, as opposed to the deciduous trees that are going to be, lose leaves during the fall or during the winter?
Yeah, I don't think we wouldn't have any issue changing that to more of an evergreen thing. I think probably wanting to have some of both along there to break that up a little bit. But yeah, if adding some different planting types along that edge to make sure we had something in the winter is something we'd be totally on board with.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Dillon, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair Brennan. Your presentation on the stormwater management focused a lot on the peak flows and the comparison of the mitigated peak flows to the pre-developed and the historical. So the flow controls, I know there've been a lot of public comment and concern about stormwater volumes. And the flow control standard actually does deal with volumes, and that it requires you to match durations at all of those flows. Do you have those plots available to show, or is that something that can be made available for?
It's definitely part of the record. I can pull up some of them. You're 100% right that the math behind it is significantly more complicated than I tried to make it sound. and we are meeting all the duration requirements with the Western Washington hydraulic model to do that. So I can pull those up now, or I can put something together and bring that back if that's whichever way is simpler for you guys.
Knowing what those plots look like, it might be better if you bring something back that's a little bit simpler.
I can screenshot
But I
some
think
of
it would be good to demonstrate how you're meeting that condition.
I can do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good request, and it would just be explaining what that means when we're talking about flow conditions during various volume periods. So it's mostly about the concept and how that works, and then how it's being addressed. Are there other Commissioner Dillon? Did you have an additional question?
No, that was it.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Akeda.
Thank you, Commissioner Brennan. Commissioner Dillon actually touched upon my question. I do just a further clarification. What's the design storm that the stormwater system is designed to?
So it's actually a series of storms. So it takes 50 years of runoff and runs it through the model. So we're matching durations from 50% of the 2-year storm up to the 50-year storm of it.
Then if you hit a 100-year event, how does it handle that?
So at that point, we would be exceeding the code requirements, and we'd be in an overflow condition. So we've designed that overflow condition to go out to 228th. We're reducing the flows that would have gone to Providence Point or any of the neighboring communities. We've done analysis to show that water would make it down the system within 228th and out the downstream drainage path to Laughing Jacobs. So we wouldn't have any impacts to neighboring communities or homes or anything like that. But it would be in an overflow condition above the 100-year storm.
Okay. Thanks. And just a quick question on there's multiple retaining walls, various heights. Just knowing that there's kids involved, is there fall protection or ways to keep kids from, I'm always looking at things that can happen. So if you have a ball field with a 38-foot high wall, someone's maybe going to climb it or jump off of it.
Yeah, so we've been working with the district extensively on that. I've had the same concern from all kinds of perspective. I have little kids, so I'm always amazed on what they climb on that I told them not to. So trying to figure out how to keep them away from that. We do have fall protection on every wall on the site as required by code, and from a school district perspective, trying to make sure that we're keeping kids as safe as possible. Those tall retaining walls, we also added some additional kickers of fences to make sure you can't get out around the fence, because the fence is set back 6 or 8 inches from the top of that wall where you actually build it. And so building a piece to make sure somebody can't get out there and scale the edge of it has also been added at the district's request.
And then switching subjects a little bit on the civil plan and profile, looks like the entrance road is at a 12% grade. Is that I guess the maximum you can allowable?
It's the maximum.
I mean, can you actually let me rephrase that. Is there any way to reduce that slope?
We've tried to reduce it numerous times, actually. We as a team wanted it to be closer to 10. 12 gets right on we're at the maximum the city allows from a code requirement. We're at the maximum the fire department really likes to see. They can do a little bit more, but 12 is what they would like to hold you to. The problem is the length of the road to get up to those baseball fields, to get to that elevation. So if we push that down, we need ADA access from that point to the high school. And when you start intertangling those pieces, we need to try to get up the hill as fast as possible to get to the elevation the high school wants to be at, which is around 510, which is the same elevation that the previous site was at. So while I would love to reduce that, the 12% really is needed to minimize on-site grading and earthwork.
Yeah, you really do have a Tetris problem. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there questions from the commission to the applicant team? Commissioner Sanford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will have a few more questions, including several on the noise study, but I want to be mindful of the time tonight. And I know we have some wrap-up questions and details to take care of tonight too. So I guess my question is, will we be able to continue questions of the applicant in our continuation of this meeting tomorrow?
So we could continue the questioning at the beginning of the meeting tomorrow, because we are getting close to 10 o'clock, before we take public comment. After public comment, there would be another opportunity to ask the applicant questions. But after that, we would, when we're in deliberations, we won't be asking questions to the applicant, only to the staff. So there is an opportunity to continue. We can go for a few more minutes here. So if you have additional questions, they can answer tonight. I think we should just continue to proceed. But if we close and there are still questions that you want to ask tomorrow as we begin the meeting, we can do that before public comment.
Okay, let me get in a couple then regarding the noise study. Attachment 46. I was wondering if the traffic noise from 228th Avenue Southeast was included in the decibel results in that study.
Is there a member of the applicant team that can address that question?
I'm looking for an answer. I know they looked at it. I'm not going to be able to answer your specific question if it's in that memo. And my reasoning, because I remember giving them the traffic data for them to look at, I just don't know if it was included in what got finally done.
Yeah, and I guess my concern there is we're obviously reconfiguring that entry to the site off 228th, and we're going from, it looks like a 2-lane road to a 4-lane boulevard and taking out trees, and we have retaining walls on either side. They're maybe up to, I don't know, maybe they're a dozen feet tall, something like that. So I'm wondering, aren't we logically looking at an effect in which the sound from 228th can be funneled directly up the hill toward Providence Point behind the structure? So I was wondering if that had been modeled, or if decibels from 228th had been taken into account in this study, or if that sound was exempt from the study for some reason. So, and that's fine. I'll have a few more in this general regard. So it sounds like you're probably going to research that for the next meeting anyway.
And try to bring my sound consultant to tomorrow.
Yeah, okay, great. So why don't I defer the questions until later on, because they're all going to be around this
Okay, I appreciate
general
that.
topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners have any additional questions for the applicant this evening? I have just related to the retaining walls, which is another point of concern from folks. There are a number of taller walls on the west side of the property related to the construction of the elementary school site. And can you describe one? I don't have the plans in front of me. They're downstairs on the dining room table still, so I have to go with just a quick description. But there are some fairly tall wall conditions on the west portion. Can you describe what's being done to kind of mitigate the impact or screen those walls?
Yeah, so we've designed the walls, so we pulled the walls back. We previously had them stepped into that hillside, which was going to wipe out a lot of vegetation. So taking that stepping away and making one taller wall that does get to about 12 feet at its tallest point along that edge is made it so we could retain more existing vegetation and more of those existing trees. That area along that portion of the site is actually fairly dense when you get back through some blackberries along the road. I've been back there numerous times. So but it'll be existing vegetation through the most of it, and then we're gonna plant some saplings in to fill in some of those gaps to make sure that we get a complete buffer situation.
And then along the 228th, and I think the staff report or one of the documents references that you're constructing that frontage improvement to meet the city of Sammamish road standards, I believe, or at least one segment of it. So, and so it sounds like you're still working with the Sammamish staff to kind of review those documents. But there were, it looks like tiered retaining walls. So you've got stacked retaining walls that get up, when you look at them together, that get up to a fairly significant height. Can you talk a little bit about what's, and in that tiering, is there vegetation being planted, et cetera, to try to soften that wall condition? Again, you've got varying heights of retaining walls along 228.
Yeah, so widening 228th into that hillside is problematic from a grading standpoint. So we're pushing into the existing hillside. We have to make up the grade. So either you daylight all the way to the top of the hill and wipe all the trees out, which obviously doesn't meet a lot of the requirements of this project. So what we heard from staff and when we were talking to the community last time, I think we previously had one tall wall at the back of the sidewalk, and that didn't seem very nice from a pedestrian standpoint. So we wanted to build a small front wall that was pedestrian scale, so less than 4 feet tall, to come up next to the sidewalk and then have some vegetation to break up the bigger wall that would be set back 6 feet behind that sidewalk. So there is a bench there with vegetation on it, trees proposed, and then the taller wall farther away from the sidewalk. So it didn't feel like you were, along 228th in this little box that you had to stand in and maybe not feel as safe as you could.
Right. Yeah, I remember the discussion about this. I think I had some questions during the community conference about the tall walls along 228th and the pedestrian experience. So that sounds like a much better solution. Understand the grading issue that creates, because it is a fairly steep slope right there. Are there any other questions for this evening? Commissioner Sanford's going to have a few questions remaining for the beginning of the meeting tomorrow evening. It doesn't prevent anybody else from asking additional questions as we open the meeting tomorrow. But certainly, if you have questions, we've got a few more minutes. We could handle those tonight. And if not, since we still have some questions remaining from the commission, and we're at 10 o'clock, which is generally the time where we try to adjourn the commission meetings. I think unless there's opposition, I think that we would deal with some of the remaining business items I think that we have on the agenda, some report outs from staff, and then we would adjourn for this evening. We would continue the public hearing into tomorrow evening's meeting, which starts at 7 p.m. And tomorrow's meeting would primarily be to hear the public comments from the public. So we would get on a rhythm, I think, in hearing that public comment tomorrow evening. So Lucy, I believe it goes to you. Do we have any reports from staff to share?
The one thing I'll bring up to limit this this evening is I was contacted today to remind there are 4 commissioners whose terms are up this year, and application is, the period ended, but they are extending it through Sunday. So I'm encouraging Chair Brennan, Commissioner Sanford, Commissioner Soa, and Commissioner Ikeda to submit applications. If you're interested in doing so, or anyone else who is listening on this is welcome to submit an application for any of the city's commissions and boards. The address is issaquahwa.gov/apply. Again, issaquahwa.gov/apply to apply for any of the boards and commissions, including renewing your terms on the Development Commission.
Great, Lucy. Thanks for the reminder on that. Is there any other city business or council updates to share with the commission this evening?
I don't know if Director Dollywall has any updates that she would like to make this evening.
Good evening, commissioners. No, due to the lateness of the hour, I don't have anything major to report.
Great, thank you. So again, we will conclude for this evening. There will be some additional questions of the applicant from the commission, an opportunity to ask the applicant questions tomorrow evening. And then we will dedicate, I'm guessing we've got a number of people that would like, from the public, that would like to speak to the commission. So we will certainly make an opportunity to do that. We'll talk about how we do that tomorrow evening. So we will continue the public hearing until 7 p.m. tomorrow. And with that, we will adjourn this meeting this evening. So thank you, everybody. And for the public that are out there listening. And thank you for your patience, and hope to see and hear from you tomorrow evening. Have a good evening, everyone. We're adjourned.
Thank you.